everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on imposter syndrome. My name is Elissa Makris. I'm a business psychologist at Thrive. And today we'll be talking about what imposter syndrome is and how to tackle it, because it's been a subject that's been on many people's minds. And it's a conversation that not many of us might have started or feel comfortable talking about. So this webinar is just a way to start the conversation, to facilitate it, and really show some compassion for each other, to make sure that we all are aware of each other's feelings and emotions and how we feel about this specific topic. So this webinar will be around 30 minutes, probably. It's not going to be too long. And we'll talk about basically what imposter syndrome is, how it comes about and how to tackle it. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So there's a Q&A function where you can put in any questions that you might have throughout the webinar. You can put them in anonymously if you would like. And then there's also the chat function where you'll be able to bring in any points or have discussions amongst each other. I'll try to monitor them throughout this webinar, but I'll probably be able to get to them at the end and be able to go through everything in more detail then. So what is imposter syndrome? So imposter syndrome, this concept was termed by psychologist Pauline Rose Clancy and Suzanne Eames in 1978. It is defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. It disproportionately affects high-achieving people who find it really difficult to accept or acknowledge their accomplishments, and also maybe wonder if they deserve the praise or the achievements that they have accomplished. So the focus of their study was on high-achieving women particularly. They found that despite having outstanding academic and professional successes, these women experience this phenomenon, thinking that they are not worthy of their achievements or maybe have fooled anyone who thinks that they might be. Since then, many studies have found that this phenomenon is pervasive across gender, race, age, and a huge range of occupations as well, though it may also disproportionately affect the experiences of underrepresented and disadvantaged groups. So imposter syndrome is frequently accompanied by feelings of discomfort and second-guessing your abilities or second-guessing your sense of belonging. And often, sometimes it is accompanied by mild anxiety as well. So how does it happen? Often people experience imposter syndrome when their abilities and achievements are not acknowledged, and they frequently get scrutinized. And this is something that can start even from childhood, when a person might have been criticized often by their parents, family members, friends, or teachers. This results in them having this deeply ingrained belief that they are not good enough or not worthy enough of their accomplishments. And these are also known as core beliefs. I will talk about this a bit more later when I mention cognitive behavioral therapy. And it can be really hard to identify these core beliefs that affect our perception and our thought processes about specific situations in our daily life. Another reason could be that the individual does not identify with any role models within their environment, and this lack of connection can result in a person questioning whether they belong to the environment that they're in, or if they will ever get to achieve the position that they are striving for. Knowing that others who may be in a similar background to ourselves or who have similar life experience have accomplished a certain level, status, or impact within society, this helps us to believe that we could potentially be able to do the same. Also, everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon called pluralistic ignorance, and this is where we each doubt ourselves privately, but believe we are alone in thinking that way, since no one else voices their doubts. It's tough to really know how hard our peers have worked to get to where they are, how difficult they find certain tasks, or maybe how much they may doubt themselves. And this makes it really difficult to dismiss feelings that we are less capable than other people around us. And this is why, as I mentioned earlier, it's so important to be able to start that conversation so that we can tackle this pluralistic ignorance that we might be experiencing, which might cause us to feel this imposter syndrome. So what are the effects of feeling this syndrome for long term? So people who experience it for a prolonged period of time can start losing confidence in themselves and their own abilities, resulting in this high self-doubt. Often this is linked to a fear of success, fear of failure, or even self-sabotage at times. Ultimately, these individuals may avoid sharing their ideas as well as shy away from certain tasks or experiences due to their constant fear of exposure or isolation or even rejection. Sometimes imposter syndrome is also linked to this workplace trauma, which I will be discussing a little bit more when I go into detail about how people's attitude, biases, and workplace culture can enhance feelings of self-doubt and isolation. It can be really difficult to overcome workplace trauma as it can affect people's ability to integrate into a new job or new organization due to their maybe past negative experiences that they have felt in their previous jobs. If this is not addressed in the long run and the right coping mechanisms as well as support structures are put in place, the person may start avoiding work or taking on tasks not take on tasks or responsibilities altogether, resulting in their fears really getting enhanced and eventually could lead to the development of anxiety or depression if they feel that they are constantly isolated or scrutinized for whatever tasks they're taking on, or feel like they are not worthy of the accomplishments that they have achieved. So what can we do? So the second part of this webinar is just around what we can do ourselves, so looking at our own behaviors, and then I'll talk about what organizations can do to look at their behaviors as well. So imposter syndrome tends to put the blame on the individual sometimes, and in earlier studies of this phenomenon, many groups were excluded. For example, people of color, people of various socioeconomic backgrounds, different genders, and a variety of professional backgrounds, meaning that the historical and cultural influences are often not accounted for, which is what drives behavior and what shapes our sense of identity and belonging within a society. Often the focus seems to be on fixing the individual who is experiencing the imposter syndrome rather than taking a closer look at our surroundings and even at our own behavior that could be part of the problem. So we need to question our own assumptions, expectations, as well as stereotypes. These are what frequently causes these in-group and out-group behaviors, as well as leads to individuals to question whether they belong to a particular group, whether they can acquire skills that others have, or if they will be able to have the same opportunities that others have. And these thoughts of self-doubt, they do not come naturally within us. We're not born with them. Rather, they are what we have been learned, what we have learned from society and what we have learned from our experiences. So we tend to assume that confidence automatically means that someone is a competent leader. However, overconfidence can lead to conflict when trying to work for common interests of the group. So we need to question what actually makes a good leader and what actually makes a good team player. And what has society taught us compared to what we have learned from our own experiences, and what do we actually value in our peers as well as in our leaders. So part of this is also taking a really closer look at the language that we use. The word imposter itself, it has a negative connotation to it, making it look as though that the person is a criminal or a fraud, even though the only thing that is really going on is that this person is doubting their role within a team or their skills. So why should it be associated with such a negative word? While the word syndrome also has medical associations to it, making it seem as though it's a clinical disorder, which it is not. And this can automatically result in labeling bias and enhance feelings of social exclusion. So lastly, the individual is often perceived as suffering from this syndrome, as if it's a chronic condition that is particular to that individual, or that they must endure, or that they are defeated by. And this diminishes a sense of competence to feel empowered to manage and overcome these feelings. So we need to ask ourselves, why do we label someone as having imposter syndrome? Is it the right thing to do? Is it helpful to that individual to give them that label? Or is it helpful to us if we are labeled in that way? So it's kind of a reflection upon the labels and how they make people feel as well. And also it could lead to self-fulfilling prophecy when we are labeled with a certain condition, which in this case, this is not a medical condition. So why does it need a label? So the next part is about how can we change habits in the workplace to prevent individuals from experiencing this syndrome. It's really important to train employees on how to give good feedback. We all respond differently to feedback depending on our personality, on our past experiences, and relationships we have with others. So when individuals receive feedback, and we need to make sure that this is seen as something constructive. So taking a solution-focused approach is a really good way to start. There may be a few things that can be improved, but we need to ask ourselves, how can we help this person to make these improvements? And this can be done by identifying the resources and the support structures that are already in place and signposting them to the relevant ones depending on their individual needs. And this is how you look for the solution and not just for the problem. The other important thing we need to keep in mind is facilitating mutual feedback. So ensuring that the person knows that they can voice their concerns and their opinions and that they will be listened to. And this is commonly done by creating psychologically safe space where an individual feels that they are able to contribute to discussions and really pitch their ideas without feeling scrutinized or ignored. And by having compassion and understanding for each other's strengths, but also each other's weaknesses, we are able to create teams that can really thrive by utilizing their diversity of backgrounds and experiences. Of course, this is often easier said than done, and in high pressure environments or situations, often compassion and empathy gets overlooked as the focus is on producing results rather than focusing on the process. But we need to have enough time and space, maybe in between, to reflect on this so that we're able to bring these human qualities back into everyday work. And this can be done by mutual feedback sessions. Lastly, we have to take a closer look at leadership as well. As mentioned before, people who experience imposter syndrome also often feel like they do not have anyone within the organization that they can identify with or relate to in terms of maybe past experiences, socioeconomic background, cultural background, or educational background. We need to evaluate how representative leadership is of the workforce, and if there are some discrepancies there, it might mean that further investigation needs to be made to identify the reason and whether that has an impact on how employees perceive their organizational identity. So the last thing is about ourselves, what we can do to help ourselves overcome the syndrome. So here again, I want to emphasize that imposter syndrome is not something that only results from the individual. It is this complex interplay between environmental situations and psychological resilience that can result in these feelings. So in essence, all these components need to be looked at in order to identify what can be changed or where we can make adjustments. So to build our psychological resilience, we can start with cognitive behavioral therapy. Just because it has the word therapy in it doesn't mean it's only meant for treatment of mental health conditions. It is also a great way to understand the inner workings of your mind. It allows you to detect triggers that you might have in the environment, such as specific situation, maybe in this case, receiving feedback for a presentation or a piece of work. You then identify the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that accompany the situation. You may identify that you often start thinking to yourself, oh, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough to have this job. When these thoughts also sometimes are called these core beliefs, they pop into your head automatically. But when through CBT, we're able to detect them and classify them as unhelpful thoughts. You will then be able to reevaluate them and to change them to more helpful ones. So for example, the feedback that I'm getting will allow me to do even better in my next presentation or piece of work. And just because there were some things that could have been done better does not mean that I did not do a good job. And I'm capable of doing this job and, worked hard to be here. So identifying these unhelpful thoughts and changing them to have more of a growth mindset for yourself as well. So it's being able to take a step back and look at the larger picture. Sometimes really when our emotions are very strong or negative, it can feel like they take over everything. And we might just start jumping to conclusions very quickly. So CBT will help you to identify this and ultimately lead to more helpful thoughts and helpful behaviors. As mentioned before, a lot of times people who have imposter syndrome, they might stop exposing themselves to certain tasks or not want to share their ideas because of worries that they will get scrutinized or excluded from the team that they're in or from the society. So they are able to identify this and be able to continue these tasks and to be able to grow from their experiences, and rather than seeing it something that they're not worthy of, seeing it as something that they have worked hard for and that they are worthy of the achievements that they have accomplished. So often we can be our own worst critic. This is where self-compassion really plays a critical role. It might help to know that the judgmental mindset we have about ourselves or others always comes from somewhere. So like I said before, none of us are inherently judgmental from birth. We acquire this mindset by being judged by others, by our parents, by our teachers, by our friends, just generally by society. And the way we drop our judgmental mindset is by seeing that many of these voices and these thoughts in our head, they're frequently not our own, nor do they reflect this ultimate truth. So they're merely just opinions, really. And the question you need to ask yourself is, which ones do I want to listen to? So here are just some tips that you can take away. So one good place to start is by thinking about how you would treat others that you care about. So while we can't always take away others' pain, we can validate its existence and provide support to help them get through it and grow in that respect. So really let yourself make mistakes. So self-kindness and being human taps into two separate but related ideas. So we're human, but A, so is everyone else, and B, that's okay. So rather than interpreting our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors as who we are, we can let ourselves off the hook when we might not do the same, when we might also do the same for others as well. So let's say if a friend gets lazy and doesn't answer your phone call, you probably won't instantly assume that they're a bad person. So giving yourself permission to be human once in a while is one way to accept your flaws and remind yourself that you're not alone in being imperfect. Also care for yourself as you treat others, so closely related to what I said previously. This is about being understanding and empathetic towards yourself. So if a friend is feeling down, hurt, or upset, you might hold their hand or use words of encouragement. And this allows you to tap into your caregiving system to release oxytocin, which has beneficial health effects. So really use this tender, forgiving language on yourself as well, the same way that you would do for a friend. And these gestures can lead to us feeling a self-kindness, even if we're initially reluctant to do so. The other point is about becoming more self-aware. So other techniques relate to self-awareness and tapping to your inner self-talk. So instead of beating yourself up for negative talk, becoming aware of your internal narratives. So this awareness is a great starting point for changing that self-talk. So use releasing statements. Maybe you've never been a big fan of positive affirmations. Maybe they don't feel natural to you, or you believe they don't quite reach that inner critic of yours. If that's the case, you might also try these releasing statements, and they are closely related, if not equivalent, to these mini exercises on self-forgiveness, and they tap into mindfulness concept of this non-judgment. So when you catch yourself thinking an unhelpful thought like, I'm not good enough at this, and I'm a bad person for getting upset about this, try turning it around and releasing yourself from these feelings. Instead, try to say, it's okay that I feel upset. It's okay that I don't feel competent enough. So acceptance is a great way to start before you start changing your self-talk. The other one is self-acceptance, so embracing your own perceived shortcomings as well as your character strengths. So self-compassion is about not overinflating these shortcomings into a definition of who we are. Rather, they are just thoughts, opinions, and feelings. So a good way to practice is practicing mindfulness is a good way to center ourselves in the moment. Not only is mindfulness one of self-compassion's core constructs, but it also helps us to regulate our emotions, to be able to cope with or accept troubling feelings as well as thoughts. So try not to judge yourself too quickly. So stop assuming you'll behave a certain way, which sometimes precludes the possibility that you'll act in a different way. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt to avoid acting in these self-fulfilling prophecies that I mentioned earlier that come when usually we label ourselves in a certain way. The other thing is practicing gratitude. So reflecting on things in your life that you appreciate will foster a sense of compassion, acknowledging the good that others have and that other things have contributed to your life and that you have also achieved in your life. So being grateful for the diligence and the achievements that you've had to get to where you wanted to be. So the other point is regaining perspective. So from here, you can just zoom out to remind ourselves once more that we're connected to others, that we're part of a much bigger picture, this common humanity, and adjust our focus accordingly. And here are some examples. So let go of the need for outside validation. Lots of our unhelpful thinking comes from how others perceive us. If we're beating ourselves up for eating something, for instance, a lot of the self-directed anger stems from these social pressures, like the pressure to look a certain way or maintain a certain weight. And choosing not to tie our happiness to outside influences can be an act of self-kindness. And then the other point, which I really wanted to emphasize in this specific webinar, is reaching out to others. And this might sound like the opposite of the above, but in fact, this technique is more about placing your feelings into context. When we talk to others, we realize that we're not alone in this feeling in this feeling of imposter syndrome. It's an important part of reaffirming our sense of connectedness, reframing our perceived problems with the bigger picture, and building these social support networks that are invaluable to our well-being. So yeah, now that was quite a short webinar, I know, but it was a little bit more practical. I hope it gave you a little bit more background on what imposter syndrome is, the different ways we can tackle it by understanding how we treat others, how organizations are constructed, how society is constructed, as well as if we're suffering from imposter syndrome ourselves. I said suffering, but it's again, the language that we need to be careful of. So if we're experiencing this, then, making sure that we take some time for self-reflection and gratitude to ourselves and cognitive behavioral therapy to identify unhelpful thoughts and what situations really trigger them, and our core beliefs as well that we have experienced from early childhood when we're being judged by society, as well as the biases that we might have been exposed to. I'm going to go ahead and start with the Q&A now. Okay, so I've just started a new role at work and have imposter syndrome. Should I broach this with my line manager? And if so, how? Yeah, great question. Thank you. So often when we start new roles, it's really one of the main points where we might have imposter syndrome because haven't found our place maybe within the team yet, within the organization yet. So taking some time to really adjust and feel like you're part of the organization might be a good place to start for yourself. So being patient in that sort of way, but definitely do talk to your line manager about this. Try to have an open conversation about it. The way you can start this conversation is by asking for a little bit of feedback on certain maybe tasks or performances or certain things that make you feel unsure, and just explain why you feel like you're quite unsure if you know how to approach a situation or how to approach a situation, if you're doing the right job, just to make sure that you start this conversation, this open dialogue, and really listen to your line manager. If they have positive things to say, and I'm sure that they will, take it and acknowledge these things, because often people who do feel imposter syndrome, they might overlook compliments. So don't overlook the compliments, take them on, internalize them. But also, if there's some feedback, constructive feedback to things that could be done better, take them as something positive as well, for ways for you to be integrated better within the role and do the good job that you know that you could do, because you're there for a reason. You were hired into that role for a reason. So when the environment won't change, pace and stress aren't going to subside at work. After a long time, it wears you down. How can you sustain your resilience to feeling imposter syndrome? Yeah, can be quite difficult, as mentioned previously. Usually in fast-paced environments, sometimes compassion is kind of put into second place, and this makes it a little bit difficult to open up these conversations. However, there is usually support networks within organizations where you can reach out to EAP, your Employee Assistance Program, and they might be able to offer you some counseling sessions as well as maybe some groups that you can talk to. But the main point is to start that conversation somewhere so that you're able to relate to others, so that you're able to keep up with your resilience, look after yourself, as well as look after your feelings of stress and prevent burnout from happening, because often it can creep up on us and we don't even know that it's happening, especially if we're constantly busy. We put our self-care in second place, which it shouldn't be. Self-care should be part of an everyday routine, the same that work is part of our everyday routine. So if you think you're having imposter syndrome feelings and that nobody else knows this, they think you're fine, is it a good idea to tell others you're suffering from this, or will that make things worse? Actually, it's you'd be surprised how many people might be experiencing imposter syndrome. This has been actually one of the most popular webinars in terms of signups that we have. I think everyone experiences imposter syndrome to a certain degree, because it's not a condition, it's not a medical condition. It's something where society, or the way that, you know, our resilience or psychological abilities, our psychological resilience has been built over time, influences the way that we see ourselves. So for many of us, we believe that, you know, everyone else is very, very much more capable than we are. And it could be that, you know, we're scared to expose ourselves by telling others that we feel like, you know, we might have been a fraud, or we might have tricked people into being able to get to the position that we're in or have the achievements that we do have. But you'd be surprised, once you open up that conversation, many times you'll get feedback that, you know, even if the person is not feeling it at the moment now, there was probably in the time that in their lives when they might have felt it. It might have not been now or then, or, we all experience this type of feeling at some point in our lives. How can I support a direct report who has imposter syndrome? So, yeah, by a direct report, you can just, again, it goes back to this mutual feedback. So opening up this conversation yourself. So let's say when you're giving feedback about a certain piece of work or a certain situation, talking to them about how they feel that things went in that situation, whether you could have done things to help them feel more able um, to get to a point where they're confident in their own abilities. So asking them how you can support them is really helpful, but also coming with solutions yourself. So telling them, let's have conversations about this. Maybe it can help you to feel more integrated into the team. Maybe it can help you feel more integrated into the role, as well as if there is support that you can signpost them to, tell them, if they need to talk to somebody professionally as well, it can always be helpful for reassurance, but also let them know that imposter syndrome is not something that they should be labeled with, and that it doesn't mean that they're not capable in their role. Like, again, like I said before, they're there because of the work that they have put in. They're there for a reason. So, you can work together on building that confidence with them. How do we get others in the workplace, for example, to understand we are feeling this and help us get through it? Yeah. So again, similar to what we were saying before, it would be really great to just let them know about, maybe you want to talk about a specific scenario, a specific situation where you're unsure about your own abilities, or tell them that it's been a long time that you have felt like maybe you're not very deserving of this role, but that you really are striving hard to be in this team, and you enjoy being with them, and that you enjoy the work that you do. And they, most of the time, they will, again, like I said before, either tell you, yeah, they've felt like this before in their life as well, or they will be giving you this reassurance that you are a valuable team member, and that the work that you've done, so you can talk about specific work scenarios that maybe you've worked on together, which might help to open up this dialogue, and they will just reassure you that your place there is really meant to be. I used to be a confident person with self-belief. However, I started a new job 3 months when COVID hit. So working from home and personal family circumstances hit me hard, and have for the past year. I no longer feel confident and feel like a fraud at work, but don't know what to do about it. Yeah, here I just want to give a quick disclaimer. Um, because I don't know your situation very well, the amount of personal advice I can give to you is very limited. So please do reach out for support. Usually within organizations, they'll be able to give you guidance on where you can find the EAP service and counseling services. So if you're feeling like you have been going through quite a difficult time for a long time, don't just feel that you're gonna write it off and ignore it and get through it. Finding support is absolutely reasonable and accepting, and you deserve to be listened to. You deserve to have that support. So yeah, just want to give that disclaimer. But okay, so yeah, the past couple of months, the past year have been obviously quite difficult for many of us, many changes that we've been going through. And of course, personal life and work life has been mixed up with each other. So boundaries are absolutely blurred, which is quite difficult. And yeah, being inside a lot and not interacting much with other people can have a detrimental effect on a sense of belonging and sense of confidence. So again, the only way to overcome this feeling like a fraud or feeling like you don't belong is by having that conversation. So do talk to your line manager about the stressors that you're facing at home, as well as the stressors that you're facing at work. So what exactly at work do you feel like maybe that you're not doing right, or that maybe you don't feel very comfortable with? So, and what exactly is it that is stressing you out at home? They, your line manager might not be able to support you much with the home stresses, but they'll be there to listen to you, to identify if they might have to give you some adjustments to your work, or maybe have some more inclusive events where you're able to relate with your colleagues more, or talk with your colleagues and feel more included and feel like you belong to that team, you belong to that organization, and that you're not a fraud. What is the best advice you can give to try and rewire our brain or thinking, as this is the first and vital step to recovery, but something that I personally find overwhelming? Yeah, completely understandable. The first step is always the hardest step. And rewiring our brain, that sounds like a huge task. But it is a slow process. It's a step-by-step progress. So don't think of the end goal. Think of the medium goals that come in between. So it's about even just taking that first step to build your self-awareness, which you already have done. So you know that you want to do something about your thinking, you want to change unhelpful thoughts, you want to identify those situations where you might be feeling a lot of stress, or which are not too healthy for you as well. So yeah, you start with cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's many services out there that can help you, as well as the Thrive app, of course, which helps you with the small steps to understand what cognitive behavioral therapy is, and how you can rewire your thinking to be able to be more resilient in the future to what it is. But again, don't think of the end goal, think of the medium steps in between. So, just understanding that self-awareness, that, okay, I'm not feeling good about the way that I think about the situation, it's not helpful. There you go, you already did your first step. So then the next step is, okay, what can I do? Maybe I'll practice some mindfulness, maybe I'll practice some CBT, see how I feel about it, every now and then, or every time I'm in this situation, and slowly work yourself towards it. Take breaks in between, don't be harsh on yourself. You can't keep to a healthy 100% healthy routine all of the time. So just be kind to yourself, and that way you won't feel overwhelmed. What suggestion would you give to someone for whom negative self-talk is natural to change this behavior? In other terms, how can we silence the negative voices? Yeah, in all honesty, negative self-talk is also something that has been quite difficult for me to really deal with and get over, because sometimes it feels so deeply ingrained in us, especially if we've always been our own harshest critic, which is true for many people. So again, take that step back. So the first thing is to identify when you're talking negative to yourself, and think to yourself, why would I talk to myself like this? Would I talk to my friend like this if they were doubting themselves? So again, talk to yourself the way that you would talk to a friend. And the next point is to see things in the bigger picture. Like, we all really make mistakes. We're all human. So it's just accepting those flaws that we might have, which is obviously like a bigger step to take. But first, it's, again, identify when you're being negative to yourself, and ask yourself, what's the point of me being so negative to myself? Why should I do that? And sometimes it can help to write down those thoughts, and then read them back to yourself again. And sometimes you might be like, oh, wow, like that really doesn't sound very nice, or like, why would I say this to myself? Because if you write them down, they're not just in your mind, that it makes it more tangible, more realistic, and it might shock you about like how negative we can be about ourselves. And again, ask yourself, would I ever say this to anyone else? And if not, why am I saying this to myself? Because it's of course not very helpful then. So does CBT or other techniques help with imposter syndrome? Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, cognitive behavioral therapy helps you to identify how your mind works. So it helps you to identify your stress triggers within the environment, and it helps you to identify core beliefs that you might have built from childhood, where maybe you've been scrutinized or criticized quite a lot, or you felt like you didn't belong in this certain context, or you weren't able to achieve certain things. So it helps you to identify exactly why you're experiencing imposter syndrome, and helps you change those unhelpful thoughts that might bring about imposter syndrome to more helpful ones, to reduce these feelings that come along with this syndrome. As a sufferer of imposter syndrome, I find it hard to react objectively to confrontation or criticism at work and take it very personally. Would CBT be a more helpful tool than a career coach to combat this? No, I mean, absolutely, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same. And yeah, career coach, just as good as CBT. Some of them might also know the CBT techniques as well. Therapists can help a lot with that. But also, you can build your own self-awareness quite a lot. So if you do, let's say, online CBT programs, they already will help you to identify when you're having those thoughts about criticism that are not bringing you the right behaviors, or giving you a sense of like growth from what you feel like you should be feeling or learning. So basically, it's all about changing your perspective, and that's what CBT does. And I'm pretty sure a career coach will be able to do the same for you, to help you to change that perspective by asking you those questions that you can eventually then ask yourself. So when you're receiving criticism and the first thought pops into your head, oh, maybe they just don't like me, or maybe I'm not worthy of this sort of position, or this sort of work, or I'm a failure, you're able to quickly identify that automatic belief, and be like, okay, wait, no, that's not a growth mindset that I'm portraying right now. This is not helping me. How can I see this criticism as something that can help me? Because often the criticism is there to help you. It's not there to prevent you from doing the best job that you can do, because criticism is there so that you can evolve and do even better, because often it helps us to really, get to a place where we might have not gotten to before if we weren't criticized. Because imagine if somebody always agreed with everything that we said, or if somebody said, yeah, you can't do better than this, that won't help us either, because we want to feel like we're progressing in life. We want to feel like we're learning, and that we're evolving. It always helps us to feel more a sense of accomplishment if we're always evolving, always learning. So criticism is there for your personal well-being, because otherwise we'll just be stagnant in one place and probably, get bored, because nobody's perfect, and that's the beauty of things. If things are not perfect, you can always work on them and make them even better. So if CBT sessions have been done, is it worth revisiting this, or redoing some sessions on a regular basis to maintain the mindset? Absolutely. I know a lot of people who do CBT. I mean, I always revisit CBT myself. So the concept and practice the ideas behind it and the understanding behind it. Because sometimes if we don't do it on a daily basis, we might forget to use it, and we might not use it in the everyday scenarios, everyday stressful scenarios. So yeah, revisit the sessions. It can be helpful. And everyone kind of, a lot of therapists and coaches and online sessions, they all portray CBT. Obviously, it's always the same concept, but they all have different exercises and portray it differently. So you might learn something new by trying out the sessions again a few years later, or you might have a whole new perspective or idea of how you want to use these sessions. So do revisit them over time, because we are always changing ourselves as well. What is the first thing? Oh, sorry, that's a fire alarm. Wait. Sorry, I always forget that they do the fire alarm testing on Wednesdays. My bad. Okay, what is the first thing you personally do when you start to feel that you're out of place in your role? Yeah, so the first thing that you can do is talk to someone. Talk to someone about it, because they will be able to change your perspective the most. And they will be able to give you that reassurance. And then you can also try for yourself to understand your thought processes better through self-awareness, mindfulness, and CBT as well. But yeah, the first step can be really to talk to someone. It's extremely helpful to have that peer support to really enhance your sense of belonging. I struggle to accept or take on compliments, and I'm unsure how to respond in these situations. Do you have any suggestions on how to reframe that? Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, often for people who criticize themselves quite a lot, perfectionists, high achievers, often taking on compliments is a struggle, because we feel like we never have done enough, or we never have, we can always do better, because we have that constant negative self-talk. So then during these times when you get these compliments, pay attention to how loud that inner critic is, and quiet that inner critic. So tell them to tell yourself to really actively listen to the compliments that that person is giving you, even if you think it's making you feel uncomfortable. But why should it make you feel uncomfortable? It's something really positive. It's something good for your self-esteem as well, and for your self-compassion. And the way that that person is talking to you is also the way that you should be talking to yourself. So just take that in mind, and try to understand how loud that inner critic is, and make sure that it's not overpowering every single thing that you hear from other people. So I'm 24 years old, and I know I'm considered to be quite young to be pursuing my particular career path. This has manifested as feelings of not being ready and wanting time to pass in order for me to become ready or old enough somehow. Again, yeah, this links back to biases, the way that society is structured, the way that previous people maybe have achieved the role that you're striving for, and how old those people were, or having people that you look up to, maybe role models. Maybe it took them longer, maybe they didn't start at 24. But why should that define how you are creating or pursuing your path? Because for many people, the situations, the experiences, have been different. So it's, again, having that open conversation. So why should that make you feel that way? Is it because somebody told you that you're too young, or is it because you're telling yourself that you're too young? Where do these opinions come from, and these assumptions and these biases? So it's having that time to reflect, and having those open conversations, because often we can overcome biases by talking about them more, and usually, yeah, being able to understand where we can find the role models that we can strive to be like, and to help us to know that, you know, we're able to achieve things the way that they did as well. And taking a unique path is always, it's always exciting as well. So I've been offered a role that would require managing another person. I have never managed anyone before, and I can't help but to think I'm not equipped to do it. Would structured learning be helpful, or should I almost throw myself at it and hope to learn along the way? That is up to you, actually. So that is a personality thing. So for some people, they like to learn by doing, and for other people, they like to be very, very prepared before they do things. So what is your personal preferences? Take that time to reflect, because there will be structures in place probably within your organization where you can have some manager training. And even if you're somebody who likes to throw themselves into the deep end, training and understanding, I mean, even just, you know, going to like general talks or webinars on leadership skills or manager trainings. I'm sure that there's a lot of free ones out there as well. Or you know, building healthy relationships at work, or building healthy boundaries. There's many nowadays, many webinars. Those can help you to take away some ideas and build those skills, so that you feel that you have some skills within your toolbox that you can take out when you feel like, you know, okay, now my direct report is coming to me with this type of request, or this type of conflict or resolution that I need to find. I have learned that, you know, I can approach a situation like this. And I'm sure, you know, if you talk to other managers within your organization as well, they will be able to give you loads of tips and tricks. So again, just be open about it. Say that, you know, this is my first time that I'm managing someone, and I really would appreciate some tips and ideas on how to do the best that I can, so that I can help this person to feel comfortable in their role, and I can feel comfortable myself as well to be able to support them as much as possible. So yeah, up to you personally, but you know, always good to have some tricks up your sleeve, or get some advice beforehand. And many people will love to help you out and give you advice often. Um, is there one self-affirming phrase I can recommend we can tell ourselves? So I am capable. Yeah, absolutely. So affirmations are always very, very helpful. So do tell yourself, yes, I am capable of what I'm doing. I'm capable of the task that they're giving me. There's a reason why I am in this position and why they're giving me these tasks, because I do have the skills. So tell yourself these things, and think about times when things have gone successfully for you, when you have achieved the outcomes that you wanted to achieve, and tell yourself, since I was able to do this before, I'm capable of doing this in the future again. And the other thing you can tell yourself is that I belong. Often people with imposter syndrome, they might feel like they don't belong in that specific environment, organization, or team, but there was a reason why you were hired into it. So yes, you do belong. So tell yourself that, reaffirm it, and yeah, and just make sure that you take on board positive feedback, and don't just discredit yourself. I joined my company a year ago to head up a team, which I haven't done before. I have a line manager to mentor me, but even when he praises me, I struggle to accept it. How can I learn to accept his comments without wondering if that's what he really means? Yeah, again, like I answered for the other person as well, it must be because your inner critic is really, really loud while they're giving you those compliments. So be aware of that, and make sure to quiet down that unhelpful inner critic, who's making you kind of ignore the positive feedbacks and the praises that you're getting. There's a reason why you're getting the praises. There's a reason why you're doing the job well. So make sure to take those on board always, because those are the ones that will help us to keep motivated, keep a good job satisfaction, and prevent us from feeling burned out in the long run. So yeah, make sure you take on those praises, because for our own well-being, they're really useful. They will boost positive emotions, positive hormones for us. Okay, so I'm just conscious of the time. I have a couple more. I don't know if I can go through every single one of these, but I'll try to answer another two. So expectations from work colleagues increases imposter syndrome as they build you up to something you may not see in yourself. Yeah, that's part of it. So again, I think this relates back to looking at our own behaviors. So how do we contribute to other people feeling imposter syndrome? Are we using certain languages? Are we labeling them in a certain way? Do we have certain expectations? So understanding our own assumptions and biases to be able to prevent other people feeling this imposter syndrome. So yeah, looking at our own behaviors as well. Is imposter syndrome a sign of deeper rooted confidence problems? Not necessarily. I mean, imposter syndrome is something that was just labeled the way that it is because of the fact that so many people have experienced it, and it looked similar to most people, the way that they portrayed feeling this way. So this is why it has that label. That doesn't mean that the person doesn't have enough confidence. It could just mean that the person is really high achieving and is always dissatisfied with their work performance because they always think they can do better and better. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have confidence in themselves. They probably do because they're confident they can do better. So it's really difficult to really pin down what the deep root of imposter syndrome is, because it's so unique to everyone. And like I said, you build up those core beliefs and experiences through childhood. So for some people, it could be because they feel like, they've been criticized so much and that they're not doing good enough. But for other people who also experience imposter syndrome, it could be because they feel like they can always do better. And that they have the skills to do better, but but just this perfectionist sort of like feelings. But yeah, I think this takes us to the end of the webinar. Thank you all so much for all of your questions. It was so great to hear from you. Sorry that I couldn't answer all of them. Yeah, I hope the session was useful to you, and have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.